persimmon pudding making in a given town in Indiana. He's gathering information about, this woman's persimmon pudding, and he's doing these verbal encouragements. But the goal is then to pull audio to have it in an exhibit, or pull audio to create a short little film, or audio that would support an online article or something like that. And so not only does it create an issue when it comes down to editing, particularly when you're talking over someone, which we've all done, because it kind of happens naturally in conversation. But when you're transcribing, when you're editing, it creates a problem, and you have to make decisions about cutting it out, or and possibly missing some really interesting information.
It's almost like translating from a foreign language.
Yeah, and again, it's part of.
It could be.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge of both creating a familiar rapport and making it like a conversation, while at the same time totally operating on a different level of a normal conversation, right? Because instead of these verbal encouragements, you're compensating with. You have to say that you're listening, but you can't. You don't want to always be.
One thing I would like to add to your remark about if you're having trouble understanding someone in an interview and you're trying to transcribe it, a fresh pair of ears can often be very helpful. Accents, particularly very strong accents, can be challenging. So listening, the best way is just to listen to it a lot, and listen to a lot of other people speaking in those accents to kind of get an idea of what they're saying. But also just putting a fresh pair of ears on it. I'll do that with somebody else. I can't understand what this guy's saying. Do you know what he's saying? And something else.
If you have a technology, I do a lot of transcription, and if the technology just to slow it down, and then you can, maybe the stuff is speaking a bit too fast, and it's just bubbling out of them. If you can slow it down, you have that technology, that helps a lot too. And then dot.
And another tool, and this sometimes contributes to it making it feel a little bit less informal, a little bit more formal than you would desire, but it does help if when you ask a question, if you can ask that informant to then essentially repeat back that question or answer in complete sentences, so that you could potentially exert that as a given chunk. So if I asked Allison, what makes a good persimmon pudding? It would be great if Allison would say, I think a good persimmon pudding is ... instead of it's soft, it's light, So it helps when you can get that.
Okay, Allison, what is in your essential toolkit for field recording?
I brought a little audio toolkit. These are free, by the way, these little Folklife and fieldwork brochures. I recommend you get one. They've got a great checklist of things that you need on here, and a lot of it's not technical. Notebooks, pens and pencils, the technical stuff, camera, digital medium, audio recorder, tape measure for recording the dimensions of material objects if you're going to measure a quilt or a basket, appropriate dress. If you're going to be hiking through the woods, you need some boots. If you're going to church, you need something that's going to look right there.
What page are you on?
This is on page 9. Release forms, which we have here in the back, and that's something that you're only going to need if this is going to potentially go to an institution, like a museum or an archive, and be used for educational purposes. In order to do that, people need a release. If you think that there's the slightest chance that what you're recording might be used for anything other than just, you, please get a release form, because you will make our job so much easier down the line. You'll save us so much pain and suffering. Number 7 is maps or GPS. I would add to that. But I'm going to talk about the audio toolkit portion. So everything that I've got here, with the exception of this microphone stand, fits in my highly professional audio briefcase.
Hey, Chris, can we get lights?
I'm going to bring things forward as well. So the basic thing that you're gonna need for audio recording is, ideally,
Thank you.
a digital recorder. This here is it's made by a company called Zoom. It's called H4N. And I like it quite a lot because it's very versatile, but you don't need anything this fancy, really. I might pass this around just so you guys can look at
Is
it.
this audio only?
We're just talking about audio. She's got some video and camera stuff that she's going to talk about in a little bit. But audio is my specialty. So this has 2 stereo microphones. These are going to pick up everything that, everything in front of them. They're going to pick up and a little bit behind them too. So you want to get these fairly close to your source. There are buttons on here to set a level with. You want to set a level so that it's not clipping, which means distorting, which means that the level coming in here is too high, and it's just going to sound like when it comes in. So you want to make sure that that you've got headroom. So if you're looking at a level and you don't know how loud to get it, there's going to be a little meter on here that's going to show you how loud something is. Try to get it about in the middle. Just whatever the voice or music you're recording, you want that level to be just right about in the middle of the meter, so that you've got headroom. So if there's what we call a transient, if somebody says something really loud, really quick, it's not going to distort too badly. This has external inputs for microphones. So let's say that you had something that you wanted to get in really close to, a speaker or something. Or let's say that for some reason you had to set up your recorder far away from the source. You'd like to get a microphone like this up there close. So cable runs right into the back here. And this runs on batteries, but recorders tend to eat batteries. They eat them really, really fast. So the other thing that I've got in my toolkit back here, which you I told you now, is a power strip. Always bring a power strip if what you've got runs on power. It could have, like a long power cord. But keep in mind too, if you're going to somebody's house way out in the middle of nowhere, there's no guarantee they'll have power a lot of times, and there's no guarantee that if they have power that it'll be grounded or that the outlets will all work, all that kind of thing. So bring batteries, bring way more batteries than you think.
Oh, yes, always bring tons of batteries.
Is that full? Chris, is your phone power?
Should be power. You have no power?
Another thing that's really great when you're doing these recordings is to have headphones. If you can hear what's going into your recorder, your ear's going to be the best judge of how it sounds, rather than any kind of just like digital level or anything like that. And yeah, you don't want to be intrusive with the microphone. You want it to be comfortable. I would say get your audio stuff set up first, or your video, or whatever you're doing. Get it set up so your subject is really comfortable with it, and that it's not even an issue. They're not going to ask you, oh, turn that thing off, I want to tell you something private, or, is that thing on, or, all that.
Do you sometimes prop it up on a table?
Yeah, this
if
is-
you're sitting across from one another?
Yeah, this is what's called a monopod, and I use it for a boom. So if I'm running around doing something live, like recording a big like get together. There's a jam. I'd say a jam session, but it's really like dozens of jam sessions in this big building that I was recording. So I would go around and I would have to kind of I would have to kind of go around and get it in close so that these mics would pick people up. But the best way to do it is to have it on something like this. This is a tripod microphone stand, and they make smaller ones that you can put just on a table. I don't recommend setting your recorder directly on a table, especially not one that anybody else is touching, because it's gonna pick up any kind of, if this vibrates, that's gonna come out on the recording, and that can happen from somebody breathing, or, just touching it really lightly, something that you can't even hear with your ear, can really, come across in a recording if it's directly touching it. You guys have questions, or do you like to add?
Yeah, this is awesome. This is amazing. And I've had a variety of recording apparatuses, everything from like, I had this Cord D1200 that had the mixing board built in, so you could do the recording, mix it down, and burn a CD and leave a copy with the person you were recording before you left. It was a bunch of money. I still have it, but I never use it. I've been doing mainly single person interviews, not recording in like live music situations necessarily, for a while now. And I have to say, like, GarageBand on my laptop, which is a free program, works terrific for me. You can download that program for free. It has different settings, so if you are recording instruments, or you are recording voices, and it even splits it up into male and female voices. I can probably, it's really great, and what I usually do when I'm doing interviews is just a single channel. You can pick multiple channels, I mean, you can get crazy with it. But if you pick single mic, male voice, put it in between you where it's,
You're just situating just the laptop, you're not...
just the laptop, yeah. Those have been some of my best recordings in terms of conversational recordings. And then you can do that with your phone as well. If you have a smartphone, there's a free app for GarageBand, so you can get that on your phone. But your phone comes with, if you've got an iPhone, it comes with an app called Voice Memos, and you can, I'm sure that there's an Android similar thing that comes on your phone. There's all kinds of programs, free apps out there that do recording, so if you want to, at least before you invest in equipment, I mean, I teach fiddle lessons, and it's kind of the same thing. A kid comes in and they're all excited and they want to learn to play the fiddle, and you don't want to say, well, I don't have a music store, but I don't want to say, like, you should really get this $800 fiddle, 6-year-old kid, or tell the parents to recommend a really high-end instrument that might sound really great, but until the child knows that they're going to really be interested in it, and it's going to be something that they're going to do forever, and they've grown, maybe a full-size violin after they've played a couple of years, you might want to recommend an investment, a substantial investment. But when you're just starting and trying to get the hang of it, those free programs, they work really good. And then, especially if it's, interviewing family members for your personal use or whatever. And those files are pretty adaptable. You can, especially with GarageBand, you have more options of what type of file you save, how you can export that, so you can do everything from a WAV file to an MP3 that you could share online or whatever.
I don't recommend recording to MP3.
Yeah, not as a starting
When
stage.
you're recording,
Sure.
try to record to the highest quality that you can. It's going to eat up memory, and it's going to eat up batteries, so be prepared for that. Sometimes you have to compromise and record to a lower quality in order to be able to get everything on your sound card. And that's no big deal, do that, but please don't record to MP3. You'll break my heart.
Anything to add to audio, or you want to talk about photography?
I want to see if there's any questions about audio first.
Well, one thing that I found doing oral pursuits is being aware of your surroundings. is there a cat or a dog that's gonna start meowing or barking, or an air conditioner or a heater that's gonna kick on and ruin your audio? And you've got experiences with that.
Yeah, but some of those things end up being really cool. I've never heard a cool refrigerator noise. But,
Yeah, like
especially like
sometimes-
ambient noise,
yeah.
like if you're, and Parlor's collection is a really great example of that. It's like, when I first started working with it, my first job, my starting spot was told to listen to the whole thing, which was really fun. I got tired of hearing certain ballads. We used to joke about, there was this ballad called The Blind Child. And it's this horribly sad story about a little blind child that gets left at home while the parents go out and party and the house burns down and the kid dies. And it has 18 verses, and I thought, and I would hear it about 8 times a day. And I got to the point where I was like, if I hear that song one more time, I'm going to poke my eardrums out, But then you would hear this really sweet, lovely recording that was like done outside on somebody's porch, and you knew it because you could hear birds, and you could hear the trees, and you could hear the rocking chair, and you could hear the whole thing. So, I mean, you can always go retroactively if you decide, say, for instance, you want to take your recordings and make an audio project that is going to be a CD or a record or whatever, that you can go in and remove those sounds if you need to for certain purposes, but I wouldn't go out of my way to sterilize the situation unless it's refrigerators or air conditioners or even fans, and even things you don't think about, like Don Reed, who plays rhythm guitar. He lives in West Plains, and I love Don. He's from Ava, but he's one of my favorite backup guitar players. He's got this crazy habit, and it's totally, he doesn't think about it at all, but he gets going, and both feet go the whole time. And I have tried to record, and I have put 2 rugs under his feet, and you can still hear it, but with 2 rugs, it's not
You gotta
so.
take the shoes off? That's what I do, I gotta take the shoes off.
Well,
I'll stick a pillow over there.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Or just tell them and say, hey, like this is gonna make this crazy noise. It'd be great.
Yeah.
I have a question for Allison. What do you do that person wants to hear it all and then they don't like it?
You don't play it back for them.
Yeah.
Honestly, no, you don't. Generally speaking, you can't play it back anyway. I mean, you can hear it on your headphones. You might let them hear a portion of it or something, but generally don't. And it's very common that people don't like the sound of their own voice. Musicians who are not used to being recorded do not like to hear their own performances. So if they have signed this release form, I mean, you're not, generally you're not selling these things.
And you can get people
Yeah,
that are really
usually-
shy and
At
like
the same time, you have to be respectful.
Yeah.
If somebody says, you're asking a sensitive question, or even if you don't know it's sensitive, and it triggers some story, and there are people still living and they don't really they're willing to tell you the story so that you know that they don't want that on a recording, turn it off, because the worst thing you could do is
I've stopped people and asked, I've stopped and asked people before, we're getting into some very sensitive stuff here. If you're doing oral history, we're getting into sensitive stuff here. Do you want this? Do you want me to turn this off? And absolutely give them that opportunity. Yeah.
And I will say though about playback and having it's usually best practice to later on give them a copy of that
Yeah.
recording.
Yeah.
So to mail it to them, or if they request it by email, you can do that. Particularly if you're contracted to do field work for an archive or the state or some project, you always want to provide them a copy of the release form, a copy of the work that you did, and photographs if you take them. I think if it's an older person who maybe isn't super computer literate, then you want to actually make some prints of those photographs and give them the print, instead of just hand them a CD and expect them to know how to find the images.
Yeah, they just find something out of their collection, absolutely give them a copy.
Did you look at that?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have a ton to share, but I'll offer a few pointers that I've learned actually just these last few months. So working recently for the Mississippi Arts Commission, coordinating the folk arts program, I've been elected to go out into the field and maybe, do a bit of documentary work on video, and a lot of DSLRs, digital SLR cameras these days, well, I'd say most of them will come with a really, really lovely video feature that kind of is just as good. I kind of like the looks more of it than a really kind of state-of-the-art video camera, to be honest. Although, certainly your recording time is shorter. So I've done a lot of photography with a lot of my field work, and usually I've actually used still photography, just because it's a little less daunting than all the buttons to me. But of course there's a lot of versatility with, if you can borrow or purchase a DSLR and switch back and forth between documentary photography and video, that's obviously a great luxury. And it's seeming to me, when I'm sort of thinking about how people access information about documentary work and field work these days, that it's just increasingly moving toward video, and that presents some challenges. It also presents some ethical challenges, I think, and some challenges in terms of skill and knowledge of how to even take that video and then edit it. There's a lot to learn. But when it's done well, it's really impressive, it's really moving, and I think really accessible to folks. So I'll do this. I'll sort of set up an average interview here using Rachel as my model.
All right.
Okay. So if you can get a tripod, that's great. If you can't, then find some creative way to prop something up. You want to turn your camera on, obviously turn it to the video feature. As you can see here, I have what's called a shotgun mic, and this is maybe like $100-something, and it'll do. It's not the best audio that you can get. I think a more advanced system would be plugging in the input on your camera to like a Zoom recorder or something like that, which is, those retail for what, like $300-400?
This is particularly expensive. You can get a perfectly good stereo recorder that does the same thing without all the bells and whistles for $100, $150, like that.
Yeah.
And I can talk about some brand later.
Yeah, you should.
Are you going to talk about lavalier mics as well?
Do you want to?
I just want to really briefly say, if you're doing video and it's a subject who's sitting down, the absolute best way to record them without having a microphone be in the shot is a wireless lavalier mic, something that clips onto their lapel and will be very, very close to them. If you have that and one of those shotgun mics to kind of pick up an ambient room sound, you'll be pretty well covered.
Okay, so a couple quick pointers that I've learned in recent months. One is that, again, you want to foster that conversational dynamic. So instead of, if I'm asking Rachel, what makes a good persimmon pudding, or whatever it might be, instead of like watching the camera, I want to be actually standing beside it. I want to set it up how I want to set it, and I want to leave it there, and I want to actually be listening and watching, possibly sitting, and simply having that conversation. Of course, you want to check the audio, you want to check how it looks and all that, and then you want to take a seat and have that conversation. Another thing is that when you're setting up shots, you also want to be, especially if you're going to edit it down, you want to be mindful of moving your position too much. So recently I was interviewing this 16-year-old grandson of T. Model Ford, who is a Hill Country Blues musician in North Mississippi, and that was a lot of fun to do. But I was standing here for half the interview, and then he was kind of having a conversation with a friend of mine off screen for a second there, and I took a couple of photos with my with my camera phone, and then I came back, and I was standing on this side, and luckily my friends who were videographers said, "Jen, what are you doing? Go back to where you were, because if you're going to edit that down, it's going to totally not be congruent with what you're putting together, and it's going to make those little things that you wouldn't think about become huge." So that's a pointer. And another thing is that, and I'm still learning this, but essentially, and this is too high anyway, but you want to frame a really nice image. You want to have it, I think usually the closer the better when it comes to something like an oral history or a sit-down interview. And if you're sort of getting an image to the side, you want, so kind of rule of thirds, Rachel's kind of on the sort of to the right here, but I want to be standing right here, so she's looking toward the long end of the video. So because it's just going to look weird if she's talking to me right here, or particularly if it's framed this way, but I'm talking over here, it's
really
going to look
awkward.
terrible. So you definitely want to sort of be thinking about where you're drawing the attention. You want that person to look at you, so that you can have that natural conversation, and kind of forget about this, and never forget about it.
Yep.
Yeah, and then my other note, I guess, would be to
Yeah, set it and leave it alone.
yeah, leave it alone.
And
But-
they'll forget about it too.
Yeah.
If you're always fooling with it, it's a constant reminder that
Yeah, and
there's other things.
my other suggestion would be to get some kind of, even if you're not going to make a film out of it or what have you, if you're using video, do what you can to get a little bit of what might be considered B-roll, which would be, so if you're talking about persimmon pudding, you want to get a little bit of the process, right? So maybe you shoot some video of the making of that persimmon pudding, or maybe shoot a contextual shot outside of the house that you're doing the interview, or if they're speaking about a photograph or something particular and referencing it and pointing to it, maybe grab an image or a shot of that, so that you can sort of do what you can to facilitate not just an interview, but an interview that is sort of visually contextual as well as informational. Any questions? Okay.